And so we fight for the Timbit. For just one moment, life is sweet. And till the long dark night is over, we put our faith, you gotta have faith, in a little treat. What would you do for a Timbit?
Hello and welcome to another bonus episode of Canuck as a Slur. I am Kelly, and with me today from the Bring Me the Axe podcast is Bryan, I'm told first and foremost, and Dave, I'm told really kind of as an afterthought. How are you both?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm all right. I'm just constantly at the edge of trying to understand technology. But although in fairness, today the tech problems aren't mine.
True.
Yeah, they're mine. All mine.
This is true. Yeah, we bring that shit to the party.
So today we're doing something a little bit different, which is, Bryan, you reached out to me when I was posting about Canuck as a Slur on Discord, and you were saying, hey, do you want to talk about, I think maybe you said movies generally, but you asked if I knew about Canuxploitation, right?
Right. Yeah. Specifically, what's called the tax shelter period.
Mm-hmm.
Canuxploitation is sort of a very, very broad idea, but really there's sort of a golden age where sort of the bulk of the movies came out, and the bulk of the, like, I would say, not necessarily good stuff, but like where the most interesting stuff came out. And so I thought I thought you might be interested in that. It's a very, very weird period of time that resulted in a really weird movies that were sort of meant to be sold internationally and sort of appeal to the sort of like the broadest possible viewership, but they just could not help themselves but be very Canadian movies. And that's what really kind of it's that sort of flavor to these movies. That's a lot of fun to talk about, because we've done a bunch of them on our own show, and we love talking about them. We're also we're spiritually Canadian, I would say, you know.
Okay.
You know, we respect you. We respect you people tremendously. You're a nation that takes breakfast very seriously.
Now you're like the real spiritual Canadians, like Minnesotans, or like how, like what is, I guess, the difference from Minnesota here? Are we talking?
I don't know, man. It's New England, so we're really close. We got the Bruins, so we've got that Don Cherry connection.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about the two of us individually, spiritually.
Yeah,
we're with you.
Okay, that's always nice to hear.
The rest of the region can get the hell out of here.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, your solidarity will not be forgotten during the coming invasion.
Oh yeah, I've already said I'm well on the record of saying that if it comes down to it, I'm going to carry a rifle for Canada.
Oh, good. Yeah. It would. It'll be interesting, but I'll be in Europe where there are no problems. So.
Yeah, we're going to replace every Dunkin' Donuts with a Tim Hortons.
I mean, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. So movies, right? I've been a bit upfront that I'm not a movies guy. Like some people, like that I talk to online are movies people. I don't know. I spent some time on the Hollywood Handbook Discord, and that's just like a podcast about bits, but there is movie knowledge running through it. And the people on this server, like I'll pop into their films channel, they just constantly name directors I've never heard of. They have these bespoke opinions on franchises I was not aware of. It's fascinating. It's like opening a door into like a meeting I wasn't supposed to walk into. And but there's a lot of movies worth covering, so I really endeavor to get guests who can really do the heavy lifting in terms of having opinions, and I can just make dick jokes.
All right, cool. I hope you got a lot of dick jokes. Yeah, so our like we are definitely movie people, but of a very particular sort. The first we do several, but they're all fundamentally kind of the same show. We started out Bring Me the Axe is our horror movie podcast, and that's what we cover. And it's because we're older. They tend to be older movies. But then we started up a second one, like not long after we started the first one, and that one's called 99 Cent Rental. It's in the main feed. You get them both if you subscribe. That one is sort of dedicated to sort of not otherwise specified titles, but it's all kind of exploitation, sort of the seedier side of film. Like we're not going to talk about like major Hollywood stuff, though, we have, but primarily like our bread and butter is like the video store aisle, like from the sort of the dark part of the video store. And so, yeah, horror movies are what we're kind of primarily known for. But like, we've also done, weird comedies and some sci-fi, martial arts. We're in the middle of a martial arts glut, on that. But yeah, that's where we're coming from. Exploitation, indies, sort of the lowbrow fare is kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I sneak an art film in there once in a while.
That's true. Scientifically proven to be the classier of the two of us, but
yeah.
But yeah, that's what we do. And the way that we go about it too is it's more than just another like two guys watch a horror movie podcast, because we do tremendous amounts of research because we just can't help ourselves.
That's extremely fucking relatable. Like I turned if you followed the recent series we've been putting out on Ken Carter, I always start with the idea that, oh yeah, this will be a 1-part episode for sure.
And then it ballooned into something else entirely.
Yeah, the final recording on it, the 4 parts are, I think, 5+ hours worth of content. And I'm still going through the edit being like, there's a few more details we really could have worked in here, but it's a
hell of a series. It was the very first one that I started listening to. And I love it. And also I listen to Failure to Launch also. So that's a bonus.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, you listen to part 1 and 2 of Ken Carter, just stop there, because I think that's just kind of peak podcast. I don't think we're ever going to top that. It was just too much fun.
Well, we got to the end of the second one and I was like, oh my God, there's more to this story. There's already a guy getting sort of like strong armed into running the stunt for the original stuntman. What is it? The publisher of the Guinness Book of World Records was assassinated by the IRA. Like, this is a wild story.
Yeah. Well, and there was one part there was supposed to be a third part. I was originally going into this like, all right, it's perfect because there's 3 like documentaries on him. So I'm going to name each part after the documentary. This won't be a spoiler for anyone listening because it'll be out by then. But the third part, I had to split it into 2 because I found accidentally fell into a hole about what a bastard Evel Knievel is.
Unsurprising.
Yeah, and then I fell into another hole about the way that Slammin' Sammy Miller died. So look forward to that.
Well, there's a little crossover here between like a tiny sliver of crossover between this and that one, because like really kind of the core source of the Ken Carter one was a National Film Board documentary.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a little bit to talk about the National Film Board. They don't really have anything to do with Canuxploitation or the tax shelter, but they're kind of like an important piece of the puzzle, sort of on the road to Canadian film in general.
This will be coming out in the future chronologically after this, but I just did a recording with Andrew Law from Bunta Vista about the movie Cube.
Okay.
Because that's why I was asking you, is Cube, would you consider that Canuxploitation? Because it is not, it is on the list you sent me. I have it on my screen here.
Yeah.
But you're saying that's outside of that tax shelter era.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
It was still made from a grant, and I think that we were, as we often do, relate the ways that there are parallels between Canada and Australia and lots of other countries. I think something, you could probably speak to this better, but something that seems to kind of come up as a theme with so many places that aren't the United States is that there are just more options for grants, government funding, even just endowments that are just there to create local content that tends to give a different flavor. And so, you have this National Film Board documentary, and it is about a relatively obscure Canadian guy because he makes big gestures about how famous he is, but he seems to be lying, right? Is kind of where we come away with that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I even just asked my parents, because, they were born in the 50s. So they would have been like young people around the time this guy was doing it and touring all over North America. I said, have you ever heard of Ken Carter? They were like, no. Cause he's just a local tractor pull guy. Like it's not the kind of person that usually has any kind of fanfare. I mean, I would say you'd never get a mainstream thing involved in that, but they did get Hollywood backers there.
Oh yeah, all the time. Even after the tax shelter sort of period ends in 1982, they cut it in half essentially. But even by comparison to sort of like other sort of like national endowments or like sort of like government tax incentives, like 50% is still like a significant tax incentive. Like in the United States, state by state, they've all got like little film boards and stuff like that. And like, depending on where you are in the country, of course, obviously, like, because Americans are fucking babies about where their tax money goes, despite the fact you have absolutely zero control over that. But the moment they hear that, like, like some art film with, some taboo subject matter got funded by like, public funds, they go absolutely insane. Like, see Piss Christ, for example. So like, it's not something that
Do you want to provide some context for a piece of art called Piss Christ?
No, I don't think so. I know the context, and let's just assume the listeners do.
It's exactly what it sounds like, but
it is. Yeah, just you look it up. Y'all got the internet.
Yeah, just Google Piss Christ on your work computer. Or on your phone on the train,
But like some states do it. Like right now, everything is being produced in Georgia because they have a fairly generous tax credit, but it's only 20% with some ad hoc stuff that you can kind of bring it up towards 30%. So like,
okay,
it used to be that way. Like in North Carolina, like in the 80s and 90s, a ton of stuff was produced in North Carolina, and but those change depending on the legislature.
Right.
But yeah, like there are other parts of the world, primarily throughout Europe, that just take art way more seriously than Americans do. And it creates opportunities for people who, ordinarily, like anywhere else, wouldn't have those opportunities to make movies. Like they subsidize, film scholarship. They'll pay for, a portion of your budget, or they'll make it so that your investors can like write off their investment in your film on their taxes up to a certain amount. Just they've never done it the way that Canada has in the past, which is to say, you can write off 100% of your investment.
Yeah, recklessly.
Like that's really what makes the difference. But still, I mean, even in those other sort of diminished cases, like they come out of nations where like, they're smaller companies, they're indies, they're produced by people who don't necessarily have the kind of like marketing eye that like a major Hollywood studio would have, where they're just like, we need to sort of cut all the kind of cultural reference out of this and make it as broadly appealing as possible. And so they have a tendency to kind of wear their nationality on their sleeve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of explain the mechanics of this tax shelter for a minute. So you're saying that like in this period, and what was the period again? That was like
75 to 82.
Yeah, it's like 1974, 75 to 82.
And it was 100% tax credit. Like if you were an American, or I guess any international filmmakers, and you came and created your production in Canada, you would essentially get to collect whatever box office you get, but you would never have to pay taxes on your revenue that you would otherwise have had to. Is that kind of the deal?
So the way that it works, and this is like a real loose explanation, is it started before 75. It was, you could deduct, I think it was up to like 60%.
It was 60% starting in 1968, I believe.
Yeah, and that was a sort of a high end though, so it was a variable rate. And the purpose for all of this was that Canada
that's 60% off, like
60% of your taxable income. You could claim that as an investment.
Okay,
so you could essentially write it off on your taxes, so it comes off of your total income.
Mm-hmm.
And so the purpose of all of that was to, Canada at the time, they had a bunch of creative, talented people, but they were all leaving to go work elsewhere because Canada wasn't producing any movies. I think in 74, they produced 3 movies in Canada.
So between 1950 and like 1968, like there is practically zero film industry to speak of in Canada. Like nothing recognizable as a film industry exists.
Yeah.
And then like, the National Film Board pops up in like 1939, but it exists solely as a propaganda tool for, to get people to, sort of fight in Europe and then
buy war bonds or stuff like that.
That sort of thing. Yeah. And then after the war, they shift gears entirely. They kind of separate from the government in that capacity and sort of becomes essentially like a documentarian group.
There's a very long tradition of documentary film coming out of Canada, especially during this period.
Mm-hmm.
And it exists solely to preserve and exhibit the sort of the culture of Canada. So all they do is just make documentaries about like winter in Canada. And
well, that's also where you get those weird, like, what's that? The Christmas Martian comes out of that. Like that gets funded almost entirely from that money. The point essentially was to give people a reason to invest in the Canadian film industry, which would keep people in Canada. And so they give this rate where you can deduct this money. And essentially, if I'm a guy who makes a shitload of money and I want to write this off, I invested in a movie in Canada. And because of this tax incentive, I can now say I invested this much money and the government will let me take that off of my taxes. And so I don't have to pay, like that comes off of my taxable income. So my income drops, my taxes drop. If it's 100%, if you invest like 60 grand in a movie, you can then take that 60 grand off of your taxable income. So you are effectively being taxed at a much, much lower rate. This is why a lot of huge corporations in the US don't end up paying taxes. It's because of these weird shelters and loopholes. This is essentially what this becomes, is a bunch of people say, well, I don't want to pay taxes, so I can just put a bunch of money into this Canadian movie. I will recoup my cost. And then when it comes time to pay my taxes, I can also take that off of my taxes. So I don't have to pay that in taxes and I get my money back and then some, whatever the profit.
And then whatever sort of share you get of box office, however you negotiate like that. So you get all of your money, all of your investment back, plus, however much, your share sort of entitles you to the box office. So like, at first, we've got the Canadian Film Development Corporation comes along.
Yep.
And they essentially try to sort of stimulate film growth in Canada and then sort of fail spectacularly because like there's a bunch of that stuff happening, but it's all weird and snooty art films.
Yeah, it's whatever like one particular group of people think is high class. And so it's like letting one small group decide what artistic film is. And fuck everybody else.
So after that kind of fails, they boost. The 70s rolls around, they boost the tax incentive to 100%, and like every sleazy filmmaker in North America is like, now wait a second.
Yeah, because it's a scam. I mean, the whole if you say you can get you get this, take this off your taxes, and you get your investment back, and then some. Of course, that's going to attract some real shady people. And it did.
Yeah. And the result is just like a parade of just trashy movies.
And some good ones.
Some really, really good ones. Like some like massive. I got a list of movies I'm going to run down you. Like a top 10 primer of this stuff. But for the most part, it's like revenge types, like kind of rape revenge type movies, like really kind of low rent action movies.
I mean, you get the Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS movies come out of Canada at this time.
Yeah, so you get some real you get some Nazi exploitation stuff coming out of this process.
Yeah, that one I've heard of, right? Yeah.
And then but like you also get like Black Christmas, which is like a major sort of flashpoint for the first wave of slashers that comes. Like there's no Halloween without Black Christmas.
And you get Cronenberg's first like 5 or 6 movies.
Oh yeah, he's arguably like the biggest sensation to sort of arise out of this entire process.
Yep.
Now, Cronenberg himself was Canadian, right? Or have I got that?
Oh yeah.
Oh no, yeah, he is. He is, and all of his movies are very proudly Canadian. Like he sets them in Toronto on purpose and makes it very obvious because you'll see like in some of these ones. They kind of go out of their way to hide the Canadianness.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was kind of the deal was to strip away because essentially what they wanted to do was like make Canadian movies a big thing. And so in order to do that, you have to make them marketable in other parts of the world. So they can't be uniquely Canadian. I would argue they still have a very distinctly Canadian vibe and flavor to them.
Well, I think that ultimately that's what makes a Canuxploitation Canuxploitation movie. Because like when we start talking about exploitation, it gets very broad. It gets very nebulous. It's really kind of hard to sort of say like what exactly an exploitation movie is. It's sort of one of those things where you just kind of know it when you see it. But then like there's thousands of sort of subgenres of exploitation, like biker movies and car chase movies and blaxploitation's a good example.
Were you trying to not say black people?
No, I was trying to think of something else, but
I mean, that's that term I think most people are familiar with. Like I'd heard blaxploitation a long time ago. I think long before I understood like what that meant to have an exploitation film.
Yeah, it's the thing that's being whatever you're doing is you're prioritizing the thing that's being exploited and stripping away the things that distract from that. So blaxploitation, it's all about usually white interpretations of black culture, or sexploitation. The sex part of it is really the thing that people are there for. So you build some kind of crappy story around it that doesn't really matter and probably doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so that's why they're so basic and usually not very good. And it's why it's so remarkable when one comes along that is good and kind of blows everybody away.
My personal favorite subgenre is Bruce-sploitation,
Okay.
which is after the death of Bruce Lee, a bunch of filmmakers came, mostly out of Taiwan, got these little guys and they put them in the yellow and black jumpsuit that he would wear, and they would make a really, really crappy martial arts movie, and then they would sell them as as if they were Bruce Lee movies. And so they would star
That's
a guy
because
named
they are Bruce Lee. Bruce L.I.
Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee L.I. Yeah, and there's dozens of those, and they're all really, really bad.
Yeah, they are.
But it's a really, really funny sort of just subgenre. You know, there's post-apocalypse movies, there's Mad Max movies.
Nunsploitation.
What's that?
Nunsploitation.
That's right. No, oh God, that's a real wild one too. But yeah,
Okay, so you have answered my question of what do you call it when you have a genre of exploitation that doesn't end in a k or an x sound? I was like, but Bruce-sploitation, I guess it works, right?
Yeah, you just jam it on there and you make it work.
Yep.
One thing that's kind of coming up for me here is there are a bunch of American productions being made in Canada, but in a much more professional way. Like the Vancouver film industry has been around for a long time, and it's definitely grown a lot out of Calgary in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
This is by pretty limited understanding, but that's come from these various, I think, provincial governments kind of finding smarter ways than just, I guess, this tax shelter kind of thing to actually encourage, quality productions to come, right? I mean, I think the flagship one these days is probably, what was it, Last of Us that they shot in Southern Alberta? And that was like a huge show, right, for people.
Yeah. Well, even though it sounds like we're kind of being like we're disparaging this, or it sounds like that these are all like trashy and it was kind of a net loss for everybody. It really wasn't, because what ends up happening is in 82, when they cut it back to 50% and the sort of the tax shelter period ends, you still end up with an entire you have people suddenly where they weren't before, who know how to make movies and make television. And they're all connected and they're all talking to one another. And so what ends up happening is they all just start making regular movies, and they start making regular TV. And what you end up getting is stuff that does sort of effectively cross the border into the United States, like most of Nickelodeon's early programming. Because the thing that kind of gets forgotten about when you talk about this is in 82, the tax credit ends, but cable television is like a brand new thing that is starting to become available widely. Videotape is huge.
And they had built out this entire infrastructure for this industry now. I mean, it spent like 5 or 10 years or whatever to do it. So when you built that out, the tax credit goes away. So what you end up with is less kind of shady or uninterested people, and more people who are still looking to take advantage of those various grants or tax credits in a place that is sort of, you could say it's the United States, if you will. If you look at a lot of Hallmark movies now, they'll say oh, this movie takes place in Seattle. It's like, well, it's clearly not shot in Seattle. That's not Seattle. But it looks enough like it. And, it's cheaper to film there. It's cheaper to stay there. It's cheaper to open a business there. So it just makes a lot of sense at that point.
Yeah. Famously, the X-Files. The X-Files is always set in the United States, but it was all shot in British Columbia,
Yeah, there's a similar thing with, so my friends I'm staying with right now, they've been watching Sliders.
Okay.
Which, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with that. A lot of that, produced for Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
Almost all of it was produced in Canada.
Yeah, so first 2 seasons were shot in Canada. I think they moved to LA after that. I think if you live in Vancouver, you can spot a lot of Vancouver stuff really easily, but there was at least one episode where they slide into this kind of place that is dystopian prison, and you can very quickly recognize Simon Fraser University, because it's a university built by, I don't know if the architect was very specific to this kind of thing, but when you're in it, it looks like the Panopticon. It looks dystopian. It's so odd. And so it's very recognizable when people choose to use it. But it is funny to hear them say, yeah, this is San Francisco. You're like, okay, sure it is.
Well, that's what I think that's what makes the tax shelter period so interesting and also a little bit humorous, is that they would, try to strip away the Canadianness of it to make it appeal to whoever, usually Americans or Europeans. And yet there are some things about Canadian culture that are very distinct. One of them is the accent in certain parts of the country. And so they would be like, well, here we are in Boston. And it's like, you are so clearly not in Boston, a place that also has a very notable accent. And it would just be like, so you're, like trying to say, well, you're in California, and everyone's just like, oh yeah, just come back to the house. Yeah. It sounds like a great LA accent.
Oh, let's go, bud. Love the Bruins.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh man, yeah, sure.
In Black Christmas, they do that, where I believe there's actually a scene where you see like an American flag flying.
Yeah, it's in the police station.
Well, like one of the main characters is a hockey player. So come on, guys.
Honestly, you don't have to go far to find American flags being flown, at least in certain places in Canada. It's
Ew.
Okay, this is just a great time to ask. Have you ever seen somebody flying both an American and a Canadian flag, like in the U.S. generally?
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because like flags especially, I think this has been a development of the last few decades in particular. But when I walk around Canada and I see a person flying Canadian flag on their house, or even worse, their truck, I'm like, oh, this person is just far right.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's a signifier of
I mean, if it's not outside of a post office, then probably a redneck.
And because I think my perception would be that in the U.S. it's been that way for a long time, and Canada that feels more recent.
It's a product of like the 50s and 60s here.
Yeah, because I have always been pretty consistent about this, which is, I'm not a nationalist. I think nationalism is bad for people and the world. With that being said, aesthetically, I love our flag. I think it's a fucking dope flag. I think it's one of the top flags out there. And so, like, I want to have flags for the aesthetics, but I don't want it to look like a chud. And I kind of, as I've grown to learn more about the country, when people, like, often around Canada Day, people have their, like, orange inverted flags and stuff, and they'll caption them "No Pride in Genocide." Like, it's very kind of bringing attention to the idea that, like, when you celebrate the country, it's so part and parcel with the colonization that hurts so many people. And it is harder to, like, get into in an exciting way. Sorry, that was a huge tangent in out of my point of being that I feel like I see this in more conservative places too, but you'll go to like rural Alberta and people will just fly a Canadian and an American flag in their yard. And I was like, are there many countries that people love to fly a different country's flag other than?
Well, I think it's kind of it's unique to us. Like if you get out of like anywhere out of the sort of the northern tier of the country where you're like close enough to have like friends or family there, to some relation, like we're like 4 hours from Montreal.
Yeah.
So it's, it's reasonable that there are people living here who either, grew up there or something like that. So it's still kind of like part of the personal identity.
That makes sense, I guess. I was just staying at a place that has this thing, which, again, from a design perspective, this is an abomination, which is just a flag split down the middle that's half Canadian, half American.
Oh, yeah, I don't care for that.
It just looks like ass, but also I just look at that, I'm like, the part of me that is a bit of a nationalist is like, that's so cocked. Don't put your flag on someone else's. But yeah, sorry, what we were actually talking about, that itself was a tangent from the movies being shot somewhere, and you're like, that's not fooling me.
Well, it's actually not. It's actually an interesting segue because a lot of that, the film board's intentions behind all this, like as much as it got abused, and it really did get abused, it initially was to try to prop up this film industry in Canada to celebrate Canadian culture. And that does happen eventually. There's, throughout the 80s and the 70s.
Oh yeah. There's a great short on the Christmas Martian Blue that comes from Vinegar Syndrome, or rather, I think that's Canadian International Pictures.
Yeah, Canadian International put it out.
It's Vinegar Syndrome, but
I think the people at Canadian International would make a face at that probably.
Sorry, CIP. But they've got a couple of shorts. There's a really wonderful, like animated part. It's all people who are related to the production of this utterly bizarre Christmas movie. But one of them is an NFB documentary from the late 50s, I think. And it's just people playing hockey, people like ice skating and just having fun in the winter. It's like, it's adorable. And it makes Canada look awesome.
And that was because, especially in Quebec, there was a fear that kind of Quebecois culture was being erased by hegemony, by like larger Canadian culture. And so there was a specific push to document what was going on in Quebec in terms of their film, because their film scene is a little bit different. There's a lot of crime movies that come out of Quebec in the 70s. Some of them are really cool. And so it was an attempt to say, Canadian film is viable. We can make it a commercially successful thing. The problem was that this guy comes in and takes over the CFDC in, I think, 78, 77, 78,
Yeah,
something like
78.
that. His name is Michael Spencer, and he really transformed it into like a commercial thing. So the guy who he replaced, I can't remember his name. Oh, I think his name, Michael Spencer, was the guy, the original guy, 68 to 78. He was the one that was like, let's celebrate Canadian culture, build up this Canadian film industry. He leaves in 78, and it's this guy, Michael McCabe, who takes over, and he's the one who sort of turns it into this commercial powerhouse where he was like, I bet if we up this, we can lure more people here. And it's like, yeah, but for the wrong reasons. Like now you've got people that are just like, want to make a shitload of money really quick. I mean, say what you will about that, you're probably not going to end up with quality stuff, which is why this period ends up being looked down upon, because the point was to build up a film industry and celebrate Canadian film. What you get is a bunch of knockoff, like American slasher movies there's some good ones. Most of them are just garbage.
They also, there's a side effect to it also where some movies were produced that were just never released, and they were never intended to be released. They were just, it was just a project meant to prop up, just a scheme to kind of park your money here for a little while.
And you see that in Hollywood right now. There was a ton of movies over the last like 4 years that big studios were putting out. And then all of a sudden they were like, we're not going to put these things out. Like shitloads of money went into it. Like big stars.
Oh yeah. Salem's Lot was one of those ones. They had to drag Salem's Lot out of them. And then I kind of wish that they had.
Seriously. But yeah, so it ends up being like this big commercial, like way to make tons of money. And like, that's, I think, when you start to end up with real questionable stuff towards the end of the 70s and into like until 82, basically, when you start to see like Terror Train, like Happy Birthday to Me, like stuff that's just, it's fun, but it's not really quality work, I guess.
There's a really interesting comparison you can make here, comparing and contrasting. So are either of you familiar with the way that the Canadian music industry evolved into kind of how it is today?
It's something like they required a certain amount of Canadian music to be played on the radio.
Yes. So there is, and this isn't something I have perfectly top of mind, but the gist of it is that the Canadian content restrictions, I think, apply to, they apply broadly across media. It's not just music. So, which is part of why I think it's interesting that the road to kind of get a viable film industry has been very different from the music industry. Because what I'll say about the Canadian music industry is I think it's very good. There's a lot of local artists domestic artists who don't break containment that are very, very good.
Oh, I'll give you that. When I was in Calgary last year and I went to the National Music Museum, and like, I would say like, 50% of the artists that were like proudly on display in there, I was like, oh, I have no idea who this person is, but I love what I'm hearing.
Just wall to wall Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of the comparison there, so when it comes to, we'll talk about the music industry specifically, because my knowledge on this is one of those examples of I will not do my own episode about it because I can just tell people to listen to a really good episode on it. There's an episode of the ongoing history of new music by Alan Cross. I think it's called 50 Years of CanCon. I'll link it in the description too. It is a really good explainer because he's basically a music historian on how did the industry get this way. This is kind of something that you were alluding to earlier about, Americans are so notoriously whiny about where their tax dollars go and when things get, funded by endowments. But that attitude has really picked up here. I think it's just kind of picked up globally. The mistrust of allowing the government to do anything is, I think, quite a globalized problem now. Whole other topic. But when it comes to this example, so like my dad, who's a kind of real libertarian coded guy, he will bitch about CanCon, like, oh, why do we need this kind of protectionism? But the way that Alan Cross describes it is it was actually shockingly effective because the state of our recording industry before the CRTC put the restrictions in place, which I want to say the beginning of the 70s, maybe a similar era here. So yes, you're right. One of the requirements was a minimum amount of content on the radio had to be Canadian. And there's a lot of weird gray areas of what makes something Canadian? Is it where you're born? Is it where you recorded it? Right? What is the blood quantum of what makes your music Canadian? But it just sort of created a situation where the Canadian music that existed was not good. It was just very, it was very much the bargain bin version of American music. Just these kind of hokey country artists, and kind of low tech
You better not be
studios.
talking about Bachman Turner Overdrive.
No, this is like the 50s and 60s. Yeah, I hope I'm not getting the year wrong, but there's a certain point where the intention of the CanCon restrictions was, as with all these things, trying to foster the growth of domestic industry. And because radio stations and listeners were subject to this now we have to play more crap music. Long story short, it created a lot of incentives, market forces even, to start making shit better. And the industry just grew by leaps and bounds because you're going to get on the radio if you make stuff. So let's make good stuff. And I think where it's at today, I listen to so many Canadian artists who I go abroad and people have not heard of them, right? People have one of the peak examples of a artist that is certainly, 10, 20 years ago, that was a household name in Canada that is almost completely obscure anywhere else, is the Tragically Hip, if you're familiar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Also we worked in a record store for a really long time. So
there you go.
I'm certainly familiar with them. It was kind of like, what was it? The Arcade Fire was like one of those as well, where like all of a sudden, like you just couldn't get away from that, but they came out of nowhere.
Yeah. The same thing did happen with this particular set of policies, was that it started out well-intentioned and there were criteria. Like the movie had to be 75 minutes or longer. It had to be one of the producers and at least 2/3 of the above line crew. So like the major cast, crew.
Director, producers, writers.
Yeah, they had to be Canadian, and 75% of the production and post-production had to be done in Canada. So the intention is good. It's to keep foreign investors from running roughshod over everybody and just being like, we'll show up with our own crew. We don't need Canadians to do this. We just need to do it here. So it does stimulate it.
Right. Because that is what was happening prior to this, is there's a whole, even in America, it's become very obscure because it sort of lives in the shadow of Westerns. But like there was a period of time, like during the 20s and 30s, where Western fatigue was kind of coming over Americans and they wanted something a little fresher but familiar. And so there's this sort of thing called Northwoods dramas, which are essentially like they take all of the trappings of an American Western and they go north with them. So like instead of like the dashing cowboy hero, it's a Mountie. But they were entirely crewed and cast by Americans. They would go to Canada and make them, then just take all their shit and go home, and then just sort of exhibit the movie in a way that like Canada does not benefit from that. So like apart from the just this crazy tax incentive, I mean the intention, and it was very successful ultimately, was to create an industry where there wasn't really one before.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting that so you would credit this tax schedule period with being instrumental in the overall development of the industry to being one of quality?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly think so. Because, what you end up getting is, have you seen Bone Cop, Bad Cop?
Yeah, we did an episode on it. It's
right. It's a great movie. And, you wouldn't, I don't think you necessarily would have that if it weren't for, this sort of drastic and very risky gambit that they undertook in the 70s. Because all of a sudden, like we said, there's this infrastructure here suddenly that just is now being used by people who actually want to make good movies.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you wanted to make a movie, you had to either go to the US or go to UK or something like that, go to Mexico in order to make movies. Because otherwise you weren't going to do it. You had to do something else. So if you wanted to be a filmmaker or a scriptwriter, whatever, you had to go somewhere else. Now you don't have to. You might end up working on American movies, but you're doing it in Canada. And more, as the industry develops, there are just more movies being made, more Canadian movies being made in Canada that are interesting and good. The late 80s and early 90s, there's a huge boom of indie movies built around the music scene. What's is it called Road Trip or Roadkill? I think it's called Roadkill.
Are you thinking of Hardcore Logo? Because
The guy, same guy, but the movie he made before Hardcore Logo.
Okay, I don't know. Again, really my holes as a movies guy. There's a lot of fodder that we'll definitely be able to do some episodes about.
You got to do Fubar. You have to do
yeah.
Fubar.
I mean, that one, it's funny. I have not seen Fubar, but it is that one at least I knew about growing up via cultural osmosis. Yeah.
Yeah. Fubar and Fubar 2 are both awesome.
Yeah. Well, as an Albertan, I have to talk about that. So
look at Canadian International Pictures. The stuff they're releasing now, it's a lot of re-release stuff, and it's all really cool stuff. Like it's movies that were really influential and important in the 60s and 70s, stuff up through the 80s. They've started putting out stuff from the 90s. It's all Canadian movies, and they're all really, really good. And for the most part, nobody's heard of them.
No, I think one of my favorite sort of side effects and the beneficial outcome of this is a series of movies that emerged in the 80s called Tales for All.
Ooh, those are weird.
And we've done 2 Tales for Alls on the show, but they're essentially they're family movies. They're meant for children, but they are fucking crazy, like mind-meltingly weird. I've actually, when we get around to talking about our sort of primer list, I got one of them on there that'll just blow your mind. But like they and the whole philosophy behind Tales for All, despite the fact that the movies are just incredibly weird.
Well, they're weird in that Nickelodeon in the 80s way, where it's like, this is all very strange. Whose idea is this? And it's like old men in their 60s who remember the 40s very well.
Yeah, it's really, really wild. But like the sort of driving philosophy behind the Tales for All series is actually very beautiful. And it's all produced by this guy named Roch Demer. This is a Quebecois guy. And so, yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to it. But like, there's dozens of them. First of all, there's like a shitload of them. They've been making them since 80.
There's like 30 something of them.
Yeah. And they continue to make them. So yeah,
wow,
it's really wild. But yeah, like these things would not exist without this. And this isn't to say the tax shelter movies are bad. Like a lot of them are very, very entertaining. Some of them I would say are genuinely great.
Yeah, I love that shit. Like I love, Prom Night, and My Bloody Valentine is one of my favorite movies.
Fucking Black Christmas is your favorite
Christmas
movie.
Is my favorite movie. And like these movies, we wouldn't have them without the tax shelter. And I think they're good movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got tripped up by Sexcula. I've been a bad ADD person and just scrolling this list right now.
That resource of Canuxploitation.com was like a big resource for a lot of the research that I did for this. There's also like a sort of state-funded Canadian Wikipedia type thing that was instrumental, very thorough information.
Oh, what's it called? Do you know?
Oh God, I can't remember.
That's fine. Well, at this stage, with the time that we have, if there is something that got you into this kind of rabbit hole initially, or was it just kind of part and parcel with your overall growth as movie knowers, or was there something that kind of like was this moment of like, oh shit, I've just hit upon a treasure trove or this fascinating concept?
It is unavoidable in the movies that we cover. It is absolutely unavoidable.
I just love Canada.
The sort of we've identified kind of a sweet spot for movies, and it's usually movies produced like 1980 to 1982. And just because we cover so many slasher movies, because that was the dominant paradigm at the time, so many of them were just produced in Canada because of the tax incentive. And so it's just like all of a sudden we noticed it. And it's kind of like once you notice it and you realize it's there and you start to sort of seek out other things, it turns into this crazy rabbit hole.
So if I can modify that question a bit, maybe just to kind of share a little more about like you two and where your podcast came from. Was there something you can point to that kind of was what got you into that genre of movie as you laid out initially? Like, did something kind of initially create your love of exploitation and of B movies, of slashers?
Well, it's a bunch of things, really. When we were growing up, the options for television weren't quite as wild and broad as they are now. Like you had a few channels, and like the local like UHF TV stations broadcast a lot of this stuff, a lot of very cheap garbage. And for reasons that I've never really been able to get my hands around, that stuff has always been more appealing to me than whatever's playing in the theater. Like I have I have very little interest in what you might call conventionally good movies.
Mhm.
This is where I live. I'm not super interested in what's getting awards at the Oscars or Golden Globes or anything like that. I would rather watch something that is crazy and cheap and trashy. And that's just kind of how I've always been. You know, I also like heavy metal music and roller coasters and like really like cheap thrills is kind of what I identify as like the sort of the shit that I love.
You're like a 10-year-old.
Essentially, I kind of was arrested development at like 12 years old, and I'm just not interested in progressing.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit relatable because very similarly, like I'm not following the Oscars. Yeah, usually it takes quite a while after something comes out for me to kind of cave and go, okay, like let me see what all this hype was about. But also, I don't find a lot of time. But the movies we have covered on this show have, I think, had a bit of that energy. Because, I mean, Bone Cop, Bad Cop is, like you said, it was a great movie. We kind of came away with, it's a very cool movie for its premise, its conceit. It could have been executed better.
Probably.
In some ways. But it's like, it is interesting in that there's something unique about it, right? In that case, it's the language. So yeah, like what else we done? We did Blood Quantum. Have you seen that one?
Well, that's a newer one, right?
No, I've not seen that one.
Oh, it's quite good for a horror movie. I'm definitely not a horror guy, but the premise of it being that there's this zombie plague that goes down in what we understand to be Canada, and the only people who are immune are Indigenous people. It's made by Indigenous filmmakers.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it's significant because it's starring and almost entirely created by Native people.
I mean, in a lot of ways, almost entirely created by the one guy who did like everything, and then died, which sucks.
It's also shockingly violent.
That is kind of what we have through all the episodes that we've done. We've sort of identified like what it is about these movies that really is quite captivating. Is a lot of these ones, even the sort of trashy like cash-ins, movies that were made purely to exploit something in order to make money. There tends to be like a sort of beating heart at the center of it that like more conventional fare does not have. Mm-hmm. And so the people who made it set out to make the best movie that they possibly could on $300,000, you know, at a time when the average movie budget is like $2.5 million. There's heart in them. There's a genuine quality that is very inviting and warm. Even if it's just like a slasher movie. Like we've seen so many that there is just so much love and care put into these movies that's ultimately what kind of draws us to it. Cause you just don't see that in like, you know, blockbusters and, you know, award season stuff.
So similar to what you're saying, something that came up, and again, I'm kind of jumping forward, but when we talked about Cube, the thing that kind of stuck out to me as something I liked about it was that the premise was very specific and fairly unique, especially at the time, right? It predated Saw, it predated a lot of things in that vein. And I like a movie that is specific, because the opposite of that is a Marvel movie, a James Bond movie, you can name these very broad genres of, we have to have one of these in the theater every year.
Right.
You know, just a generic cop thriller, but then something as specific as like, this is about the bilingual interaction of these cops. This is about racial immunity people have from a plague. This is about this is a film set entirely within a single cube set, meant to look like multiple cubes. All those things have a specificity to them that I think is appealing, and maybe that's kind of part of what you're saying. Like,
right, yeah, it's what it is it's this is a person who, this is my vision, and I don't have the resources that like a much larger production has, but I'm going to do the absolute best that I can to sort of bring this thing to screen. And even if it does look a little cheap, even if it is very sort of recognizably low budget, it benefits from that in ways that like other more larger fare does not.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I would like to do while we still have some time is, you kind of hinted at this already, but if you had to give a top 5, a top 10, or a great introduction, or just basically I want you to start listing movies that the audience can kind of go to the metaphorical video store to look for.
Okay, Dave, back me up on this one. So I've
got the metaphorical video store being, of course, the literal Pirate Bay. Wait, no, that's also metaphorical.
So I got 10 here. So I'm going to start it off with a movie from 1982, shot in Nova Scotia, called Siege.
Mm-hmm.
And And Siege is a very Canadian riff on Assault on Precinct 13. And it has a really, really strange, very unexpected subplot to it, where it's about these white supremacists who essentially they go to a gay bar and they trash the place and they kill everybody except for one guy who gets out of there, and he goes and basically hides out with these people in an apartment building. Essentially, they come under siege from this gang and have to hold them off with a very, very limited amount of resources. Like they've got like 2 bullets and some stuff, and so they lay traps and they essentially repel these guys.
It's straw dogs. It's straw dogs in an apartment building.
Yeah, and it's great, and it has this one sort of like ripped from the headlines quality where the reason that this crime is able to sort of go unpunished is because in 1981 there was a police strike in Nova Scotia, and so it takes place during that.
And they integrate footage from the news out of that period, because there was like a long riot that went on for a couple days, and none of the cops were like, "Well, nothing we can do to help. Sorry."
Right, and the reason they've only got 2 bullets is because the one guy who has the rifle like went down to the police station and just shot his gun into the air.
Okay.
It's a great movie.
It is really good. We covered that one on 99-cent rental. It's a really good movie. Severin put that one out on Blu-ray. I've also got Prom Night from 1980.
Yes.
That was a set of movies I started reading about from clicking through here, because I'm like, they made so many prom nights. Like,
how many prom nights are there? There's like 4 prom nights.
There's 4 of them. But they're not, there's 4, but they're not connected.
No, there's 1 prom night. Prom night 2 is entirely unconnected. There's prom night 3, which again, I think is loosely connected to the second one.
It is to the second one, yeah.
That sounds about right, yeah.
But the original is Jamie Lee Curtis. Leslie Nielsen's in it. It's great. It's one of the sort of like major league heavy hitters of the sort of first wave of slasher movies. It's outstanding.
It was commercially successful. It was not critically successful, but as a banger of a soundtrack.
Yep. We've got Curtains from 1983, which is often lumped in with like the slasher crowd. It kind of is at heart, but it's really sort of slasher-esque. It's a bit more of a whodunit. And the producers who made it all seemed kind of a little embarrassed by what they were doing, and so they try to kind of class it up a little bit.
Same guy that made Prom Night, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
I'll have to take your word for it on that one.
Probably ostensibly my favorite. Actually, no, not my favorite as much, but up there, very, very high on that list. 82, My Bloody Valentine.
That's a name that seems familiar. Is that a pretty well-known slasher just across the board now?
Oh yeah. There's also a remake from several years ago that's okay. That one, the original is a stone cold classic. It's outstanding. It's very, very Canadian.
Yeah.
The entire cast is Canadian. They've got the accents. There's a little bit of that sort of Nova Scotia maritime accent in it. It's wild and it's great. I watched it the other night and it was one of those ones when I realized it was almost over. I was like, "Aw."
Yeah, such a great movie.
Yeah, the accents thing is, I think, a fascinating dimension of it, because this is, again, kind of retreading what we talked about, what will be coming out in our Cube discussion. But so in that movie, you have people that are in a cube, and it is very nonspecific as to where it is. But you have, on one hand, you have characters making references that are American. They're saying like, "Oh, has the government taken us to New Mexico?" I think is one example. This is the typical kind of balance point that you've talked about, where, well, I can hear in some of these actors' accents that they are Canadian.
Yeah.
And then in that particular movie, there's a reference where one of the characters says something about Saskatoon, which is not a thing that Americans talk about, like fictionally for sure, and in real life also probably not.
Oh no, we are tangentially aware of Saskatchewan, but Saskatoon, it's drilling down a little deeper.
Right, exactly. It's a theme we'll kind of be exploring through the movies as much as we have already, of when you are shooting a movie in Canada, are you setting a movie in Canada? It sounds like from some of the ones you've described, like these things are kind of being put in a somewhat intentional way.
Yeah, it's meant to be. A lot of them are intended to be very ambiguous.
Yeah.
But some of them are just can't help it.
Yeah.
My Bloody Valentine, they all drink Moosehead. It is very, very, is prominently on display in that movie.
Okay. One of the early episode kind of concepts I had mapped out that I still want to do is this kind of idea of like, people don't get to be Canadian in movies. might have to modify it based on how much of this list I can get into. But the kind of premise being that, as we've talked about, you can shoot in Canada and pretend it's US. This is, again, talking more mainstream productions. There are American movies that will touch on Canada in very specific ways. Like a big example would be Canadian Bacon, right? The one fictional movie that Michael Moore made, where the entire conceit is this joke about invading Canada, right?
Yeah.
What doesn't happen a lot is a movie getting to take place in Canada and or characters being Canadian in a way that isn't laid on thick and isn't being some sort of pastiche, right?
Oh, right. It's not like Letterkenny or Trailer Park Boys.
Like, even those are domestic productions that are leaning into something real and accessible. The way that Letterkenny is, especially, I haven't actually really watched the TV show. I watched the original YouTube shorts they had. And there was something very real about those Hickson hockey players and the way, like, they're really creating caricatures of real people they've met.
Yeah, I've seen the interviews with Jared Queso, who's basically said as much.
Yeah. What I mean is that in American productions, like, so when I was growing up, if something Canadian happened in a American TV show, it was like The Simpsons went to Canada, The 70s Show went to Canada. It was always so, like, it was cringy because you have to meet a Mountie and it has to be snowing and it has to be this very put upon version of Canada.
Yeah.
In the 70s Show, if I remember correctly, they get like arrested and then their way of getting out of it is just to start singing the national anthem. It's profoundly stupid. And as a counterexample, I think the first time I can really recall where a completely American production had a character who just got to be Canadian without it being a weird set of tropes was Robin on How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, right.
Because she's introduced in the pilot episode as this love interest. I don't think she gets specifically labeled as Canadian for at least a few episodes. She doesn't talk in a cartoon accent. I haven't watched this in years, but like I think probably speaks in her fairly normal speaking voice. And it will just come up occasionally, or it will come up in the way like Barney makes fun of her, but it doesn't make her a non-character. Yeah, this came up when I was talking to Andrew about Cube. He's like, this happens with Australians too.
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't really just get to be Australian in an American movie unless there's a hyper-specific reason for it. Yeah, like that's the kind of cultural dearth I think exists there, where you get to be a cartoon place, but you don't get to just be a place that is treated as normal, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, like you see that, you see this sort of natural integration of the culture and the nation in Cronenberg movies in particular. His movies just take place in Toronto, and that's it. It's not a thing. They don't make a deal out of it. You might not even notice if you're not really super paying attention, but like it's something that I think was very important to him because like all of his movies are shot up in Toronto.
Yeah, Scott Pilgrim is a bit of that, although that was a Canadian author writing a Canadian book.
I was also thinking about Scott Pilgrim as well. Yeah.
And then a British filmmaker came and remade it, but would not have necessarily made that if there wasn't something to adapt.
Yeah.
So this is a piece of trivia that is kind of one of the main ones I have in mind when I'm thinking of this kind of problem is it's one thing for Cronenberg to say, I want to make a movie about where I live, but you can imagine an American production saying this movie is set in the UK or this movie is set in Italy, and that's just what's happening. And in the same way, Italian movies for a long time were set in the US, right? The spaghetti westerns. So in that way, like the idea of being British is normalized in the American filmgoer's mind. But the idea of being Canadian is not normalized in the American filmgoer's mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, which is unusual because it's honestly not that different from just like being an American.
Well, it's American exceptionalism. It's the reason why. It's, we have to, in order for America to be superior, everything around it has to be inferior. That's why there's tons and tons. That's why, Canada shows up as a joke in a lot of American production, most American productions, when in fact it's like, it's just another place people live.
Yeah.
Same thing with Mexico. Mexico is portrayed in a lot of stereotypical terms, and it's as a means of propping up American exceptionalism versus the people that are right next to it, where it's like, it's not that different. In fact, that's why you're shooting there to begin with.
Right.
Yeah. I think when it comes to, like, there's different levels of it. Like I was saying, I think a place like the UK, a lot of Western Europe is just considered normal, right? Like the Bourne movies, they start out in Western Europe, in France or Belgium or whatever. and that's normal. And then like, yeah, Canada has to kind of be this joke country. And then Mexico has to be this almost scary country with the yellow filter.
Oh, yeah, right.
There's different levels of normalization or kind of alienation. But the example that I'm thinking of is, so you guys are familiar with Wayne's World, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when Mike Myers created the character, he created the character before SNL. So he played the character of Wayne Campbell on like Ontario public access stuff, because there was a lot of that back then. I think they were literally creating this fake cable access show on real cable access. I get it. It's been a while. This was a very early prototype of this character. But Wayne Campbell was supposed to be this young punk kid from Scarborough.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, because Mike Myers, I believe, was from the Toronto area, or at least, was living there at the time. And yeah, he would do things like go to Tim Hortons and all that. So when he brought the character to SNL, I think it was even Lorne Michaels, a Canadian, who was like, well, nobody's going to know any of this stuff, and nobody knows what Scarborough is.
Yeah, so they said it like right over the border from Canada.
So instead, yeah, now it's Aurora, a suburb of Chicago. Instead of going to Tim Hortons, they have to go to Stan Mikita's Donuts, even though it's not a real place. But like, it's all very intentional replacement of what the character was supposed to be, because of this perception of like, your character can't just be Canadian because you're on American TV and Americans will not understand you.
Yeah.
This is all like the, kind of belied by the fact that when you can listen to this really early on in the first Wayne's World movie, where he talks about how he's, this guy who lives in the suburbs of Chicago and he lives with his parents, but I still know how to party. Like, he sounds so Canadian as he says it. Because he's like, for all the accents that guy can do, he doesn't try to give Wayne Campbell an American accent.
Right.
That's why it always seems ridiculous to me when they're like, yeah, this takes place in, anywhere USA. And it's like, well, why do they all sound like they're from Vancouver?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and I don't need to specify. It would be like being like, hey, this is a Canadian movie. Well, why does everyone sound like they're from the American South? You can't take things out of there sometimes and be like, no one will notice.
Yeah. In the one Sliders episode that was just on a version of this kind of baffling choice, because, yeah, so you have this show that is generally set in different versions of the United States while it's being shot in Vancouver. So probably if I listened to a lot of the accents, I would be picking out a lot of these local actors. They had this one episode where there was this fictional plague that basically killed off men. So like, men are very rare. So as the 3 of the 4 main cast are men, they get kidnapped by this dystopian government, and they are like being set up to breed. It's like, you are going to like live in like a breeding prison.
They're subjected to snoo.
Yeah. It's 100% that. It's very much that. But what's funny is where the writers want to have some fun with their world building, where they're like, who's the new enemy of the US? And it's Australia. Because in this timeline, there was this dirty bomb thing that went off. And so Americans had their numbers of men absolutely destroyed. And Australia, being this island far away, was safe from the cloud. Yeah, they have this concept of these like evil Australians, and they try to defect to Australia. But all of those are played by Canadian actors because they cannot do an Australian accent for shit. Like, they're horrible Australian accents. Like,
oh yeah, if you're not actually Australian, your Australian accent is shit.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Maybe if you have an accent coach, which, I don't think a lot of low budget stuff does, like, you could get there. It's harder. Yeah, it's a harder move along the accent gradient. But even the way one of the characters says, like, oh, yeah, we're going to take you to Canberra. And it's like, that's not how the city is said. Oh, no, that's so bad.
Hey, let me hit you with another one here. Dave, I've not seen this one, but you have. What is East End Hustle?
Oh, East End Hustle's awesome. That is a very Canadian movie. It's
from Quebec.
Yeah, it's kind of a rape revenge-ish movie. It is about a woman who is a former sex worker, and she sort of breaks away from her pimp, which is kind of he's part of like a crime organization, and she assembles her own group of like former sex workers, and they like exact revenge on these men.
Sweet.
And it's super interesting. It's a very female dominant movie. It's very Quebecois, very 70s, because they had a huge issue with organized crime at the time, and a little bit prior to that, and so it addresses that. It's gritty, it's very dark, super good.
So I think that's a pretty good coverage of the very broad idea of Canuxploitation. We've got a few starting points. It'll be good to have you guys back on sometime to talk about something actually like more specific, but this was like a great primer and it taught me a lot. Is there any kind of other stuff you wanted to cover, other stuff you wanted to add, or?
I don't know, man. I think we got it. I think we gave your listeners a pretty good idea of it.
So what we do on this show is we demonstrate that all Canadian culture and history is connected entirely through one person, and that is former Much Music VJ turned radio host turned TV host George Strombolopoulos, or possibly the other way around. So one of the... Would you say that David Cronenberg is like kind of one of the pillars of the Canuxploitation genre?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Right, and he's been on George Strombolopoulos tonight, so...
There you go.
Yeah, so okay, that's all I have for today. So thanks, guys, both of you for being here. That was fun to learn about. Do you want to plug your shows?
Sure, yeah. We have Bring Me the X Horror Podcast, which is released every other week. We could pick a horror movie from whenever, just movies that we like, and we hope that other people like. We go real deep on it. We break it down. Well, we spoil the shit out of them, so be warned. On the weeks that show is off, we've got 99 Cent Rental, which is functionally the same show, but just on a different topic. And and then we do an X-Files show. We've got a DJ show. We've got we do Bring Me the X Millennium Edition, we call it. It's sort of movies made in the last 20 years. That's all over on our Patreon. You can find us over there. Just look up by name. We're everywhere you get podcasts. So like just search Bring Me the X.
Yeah, and as always, you can find in the description. You can also find all of our links in the description. Since this is a bonus episode, if you're listening to this, you are probably all tuned into all of that. Our Discord is in there. I don't have to plug my Patreon because you're already on it. Give me more money on Patreon.
You heard him. Give him money. Shower him with cash.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, you know what? Get on their Patreon while you're at it.
Yeah, shower us with cash. We love it. We love money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fantastic. Everyone go home and think about the word sexgula. Sexgula.